Welcome to Python Syntax Fundamentals. In this video, we'll explore the core syntax rules that make Python code work, whether you are a complete beginner or transitioning from another language. Understanding these basics is crucial. So let's look at the, some of the topics that we are going to look today, that is Python indentation, how syntax works in variables and data types, how Python syntax works in lists and collections, and how Python syntax works in control flow and functions. Now let's start with indentation. Okay, so before discussing about indentation, there are guidelines define how indentation works. That guideline are called PEP 8 guidelines. What is it? Python Enhancement Proposal 8, a style guide for writing Python code. So these are some of the guidelines by using which all Python code syntax is based on how we write the Python code, how we give the proper indentation. Okay, so let's move on to our first topic, which is indentation. Let's look at how Python uses indentation. In this example, we have a simple if statement. Notice how first print statement is indented for space 1, 2, 3, 4. This tells Python that this print statement is inside this if statement. The nested print is again indented another 4 spaces. So if you see here, this print 1, 2, 3, 4. So this creates a second level of indentation. When we return to the left completely, Python knows we are outside of all the block. Okay, so this was about indentation. Let's move on to another topic, which is variables and data types. So how variable assignment happens in Python? When you write name equal to John, by default, Python recognizes that it's a string type. When you say age equal to 25, it's a int integer data type. When you say height equal to 1.75, it's a float. And when you say is student equal to true, it's a boolean data type. In Python, you can assign multiple values to multiple variables in one line, as you can see it here. So how can you check which variable is of what type? So Python has a dynamic function called type function. This reveals Python dynamic typing system. So if you execute this program, this will tell you what variables have been assigned what data type. So here you can see we have used name, age, height, student. So we have printed all of those variable names using type dynamic function. So that reveals what type of value those variables hold. String, integer, float, boolean. Okay. If I change any of these variables, automatically the type variable recognizes it and changes it. For example, if I say name, if I assign name equal to 123, which is not a string, if I execute it, automatically the variable name has int type value, which it recognizes by the Python dynamic typing system. But it doesn't error out because Python has a dynamic variable data type assignment. It recognizes the value that you have assigned to it. Okay, so now let's move on to another topic, which is lists and collection. Lists in Python are incredibly versatile. Our first list contains the numbers, but the second list shows how Python lists can mix different types freely. These operations demonstrate how common list manipulations like append, it adds an item to the list at the end, and pop removes the last item from the end of the list. Square brackets lets us modify specific positions from the list, and length counts the number of values in the list. Okay, now let's move on to another topic, which is control flow. So, Python's control flow is readable and intuitive. In our great example, notice how elif is Python's way of saying else if. The for loop shows a range which generates numbers from 0 to 4. The while loop demonstrates how we can modify our control variable within the loop. So just be careful while you're using these control statements so that you should avoid getting into infinite loop. Let's execute our sample programs. This is how the range functions work. Now let's move on to another topic, functions in Python. The syntax of function is it starts with def, then a function name and the variable inside it and colon. Like all Python blocks, use a colon and indentation. Our greet function shows f string, which is a powerful way of embedding a variable inside a string. Now, the calculate total function demonstrates default parameters, price and tax. If you don't specify tax, it uses zero point 0.1 by default. If you remove this tax variable and just specify the number, by default, it will use zero point 0.1 as tax. Okay, so notice how Python supports both traditional and keyword arguments in function calls. Now, what are some of the common mistakes to avoid while writing Python code and take care of syntax? So, these are some of the four common mistakes to avoid. Mixing tabs and spaces for indentation, forgetting colons after if for while statements, using invalid variable names, incorrect string concatenation. Now let's look at this example. This brings everything together. For example, we have a function which is defined with semicolon and we have an indentation of 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then second level of indentation to define it's a return of that function. Then the total function, which is again inside our analyze score function. How does it define? By this indentation 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I removed one indentation and run my program. So here you receive an error. The error says indentation error. So where is that indentation error? It's at line 6. So what is the line 6? Count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it says at line 6. That means this line before average is equal to total length, there is an indentation error. So I hit the tab. So by default, tab takes 4 spaces. Now I run this program. It runs successfully. Now we have talked about not mixing spaces and uh, tabs in one of the common mistakes, right? So let's say I hit the backspace. I hit one space and a tab. Now it's a total of 5 spaces. Let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now if I run my program, it gives me an error. Says unindented does not match any other indentation level. So let's clear one space. Now if I run my program, it runs successfully. So our program is defined very clearly. Let's say if I do not have any value in my list and if I run the program, it says no scores provided. So how does it do? So let's say, let me go back and undo and have those values. So the we are defining student scores here and we are passing those student score in this function analyze scores. Now the analyze scores takes our scores and if not scores, that means if there are no values in the scores list, then it returns no scores provided. Okay, let's say we have scores. Now it moves on to the next block, that is total is equal to sum of scores. Here you can see we are summing up all our scores. That means we are summing up all these lists. Okay, then we are calculating average equal to total, which we have already calculated here, total divided by length. Now we are calculating the length of score. That means we are counting how many members are there. 1 2 3 4, so it will do a divided by 4, so that comes an average. Now after taking an average, we are calculating what's the performance. So again, this if statement is again inside this function. It didn't come out of the function. So let me run this program. It says good performance. That means where our program has come, our program has come in at this section. That means it has passed through this if statement. It had checked if average greater than 90, return excellent performance. So that means it's not the average is not greater than or equal to 90. Then checked elif average greater than or equal to 70. So our program stayed here and returned the result back to result variable. Now our result variable prints good performance. So this is how the Python syntax is structured. So under the definition, under our function, all these if statements are indented 4 line, 4 spaces. So that describes all these block of code come under one function. Now let's see the last 3 sentences. So there is no indentation here. All the statements are at the extreme left. So that describes we are out of the function. So this is how Python syntax works overall in general. Okay. So remember, Python syntax is designed for readability and simplicity. Practice these fundamentals and you'll have a strong foundation for more advanced concepts. And I'll see you in a bit.